Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Yelling at Birds. Matt here. If you're wondering why am I talking like this, it's because I also use this audio for my podcast. And they can't see me waving. They can't see me just calmly looking into the camera. If you're interested in that, you can find me on Apple Podcast, Anchor, Google Podcast, Breaker, Spotify, all the good stuff. Also on my Anchor homepage, they now have a support button. If you'd like to help support what I do, allow me to do this a little bit more, I would really appreciate that. I also have a Patreon page. This week, I interviewed Kelly Sexton, owner of Quail Press, editor-at-large at Anarcho Welfare Press, and author at Vegetarian Alcoholic Press. Vegetarian Alcoholic Press, owned by Jesse Kearns. No. Anarcho Welfare Press, owned by Jesse Kearns, and Vegetarian Alcoholic Press, Freddie LaForce. This was a really interesting interview. We covered a lot of topics. We had a lot of topics to cover, so much so that I had to that Kelly was nice enough to send me some answers to some of the questions that we didn't get to, or further explanation of some of the things we talked about. And I'm going to go over some of that right now before the interview. It's kind of it's weird. It was kind of like a good poem, one that, you read it as I went through the couple of days after the interview. Like you read something and it's good and you enjoy it, but then the more you digest it and the more you think about what was talked about or what you read, like the more it kind of affects you a little bit. And that's kind of how this interview was. And I thought that was kind of interesting, because as I prepared to sit here and film this, I was kind of thinking about that. And as I was going through some of her answers. So she was born in Wiesbaden, Germany, military family. So Wiesbaden, she came to the States, moved around a bit, lived in California, which is maybe her favorite place to live, and then wound up here in our area in La Crosse, Aquinas High School alum. Favorite food as a child, they don't know why I ask this with people, but it kind of it brings them back to a place. I think I like asking that because it brings them back to a place. It's kind of sometimes warm and inviting, and it's interesting, and it kind of gets you back into that home feeling. But it was mac and cheese made by her. She made it herself. So that's interesting. Even though, she said the food isn't that interesting because it's mac and cheese, but her favorite food as a child was mac and cheese made by herself. So she kind of at a young age taking care of herself. A lot can come from that. Poetry that speaks to her, which I appreciate, postmodern poetry that moves you to act, or it's a response to current events. And like any other art form, that's what it's about. Whether you're expressing what you're going through, expressing emotions, just telling a story, but I really like authors and artists that are expressing what's happening now. What's happening now? What can we do about it? Because now is when you are. Now is when we all are. We're all here. And Henry Rollins' poetry. I knew he wrote poetry, and I didn't think about it until she mentioned it. But one thing that I feel like I've just shared this with a bunch of people, but a cool website, Zen Pencils. There was a cool illustration of a Henry Rollins poem. Or it was a cool illustration of a Henry Rollins poem, so you should check that out. And it's why poetry. It's important to Kelly that she shares her subjective experiences in hopes that others will benefit from hearing or reading it. And I think that to me, that speaks to me a lot, because that is a big reason why I do this. Why I started, talking about recovery and what was going on in my life, or just random thoughts that would pop in my head, because it's important that there's somebody out there, and she mentions it in the video, somebody out there is having a good night, somebody out there is having a shitty night, someone out there is going to relate to what you're talking about. So I think that's why it's so And to her too, it's so important to share your stories and share and open yourself up and share yourself. I don't know if it's in the video, but there's, we don't have infinite time here. And things like holding back information about yourself, holding back maybe embarrassing stories or anything like that, or being embarrassed, it's a waste of time. Because we're here to connect. We're here to grow together. We're here to experience life together. And being willing to open yourself up to other people and share your experiences and what you've gone through, however you choose to do it, I believe is a very important part of the human experience. And something that if you don't do that, you can't go back and do that again. You can't go back and feel more alive again. A philosopher that speaks to her, or the writings and philosophies of Bertrand Russell, which she does a good job of touching on that, and just of being good to one another, because we all have our own subjective realities. We all have our own subjective lives that we're living here, and we're all trying to do our best. For the most part, we're all trying to do our best and make it, and I think that's important. And Bukowski, it's actually part of my Instagram name, BV Lovechild. And because he's raw. She says sometimes crass, but most of the time he's crass. But he's honest. He's honest about his experience, and he's honest about himself. And Georgia Lundeen. I'm not familiar with that poet or that writer, so I'll have to check it out. But the poems make love to you. Who wouldn't want to read that? But that's about all I have for the intro. So just want to thank you for being here. I will have links to the publishing houses that Kelly mentions, Vegetarian Alcoholic Press, Quail Press, Anarcho Welfare Press. That's the hardest word in the world for me to say right now. I don't know why. I'll have links to those. I might float them over the video, but more than likely I'll have links below the video. So thank you very much. Enjoy the interview. Here's Kelly. Sleepy time tea with like honey and apple cider vinegar.
Oh, have you tried kava kava?
I have not.
It's actually, it relaxes you. It's like an herb that relaxes you. I use it at Naropa a lot because they were anti kind of pharmaceuticals there. Okay. And so I went off pharmaceuticals for a brief period, and kava kava really helped with my anxiety.
Kava kava?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know...
it's like an extract. You can put you put a full dropper in to the tea. It kind of tastes like crap, okay. To be honest with you, but it really helps.
Sure.
Yeah.
How do you spell that?
Kava. Kava.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I know. That's a big thing too. I know a lot of people that want to be off pharmaceuticals because it's like.
I want to be on pharmaceuticals, but I'm not.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's like you have, hallucinations. It causes all the other side effects that.
Yeah, there's some crazy side effects. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when you start and stop. I think a lot of the people have problems with them because they start and stop a lot.
Okay.
If you stay on an antidepressant and stick with it, sometimes you can have benefits from it. But I've been on every SSRI, honestly, and
okay.
I only have one that works for me.
Sure.
So.
And how long is that process usually, finding out that this isn't right?
It took me about 20 years.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they put me, it's trial and error, basically. Yeah. So it's they put you on something, and then they are just okay, well, this didn't work, and Zoloft, I was are you giving me placebos? I don't understand. This isn't working. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, other drugs, I'd just be wow, this is, really messing me up. I'm fucked up right now. Can we try something a little bit different? So it's two extremes, just trying to
right.
find the right balance, and everybody's chemistry is different, and so you have to account for that.
Yeah. And what was what were some of the more extremes that you would deal with that you're no, this is not fucking right?
Well, as far as I'm agoraphobic, and okay. So as far as the agoraphobia, it would get really bad to the point where I just would not leave my room at all, or my bed.
Okay.
Really. And so it was just like, that's intolerable to me as far as I'm concerned, because, you know, I'm not seeing my friends, I'm not doing my work.
Right.
I'll write, but that's about the only thing that I can get done. And to me, that's akin to like writing is like taking a shit. Like, it's just something that I have to do. And so like, that's not even like part of a daily ritual for me as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
So like, it becomes really difficult when you have to stay inside all the time, because like you're literally just scared to go outside. It's like, somebody had me explain it to them once, and I was just like, just imagine like you're in a big field and there's hawks constantly circling above you and you're a mouse. That's how I feel.
Okay.
So like, you know, that's not the way everybody else feels when they go outside. Like, a lot of people like to go on hikes, you know, and a lot of people like to go outside and enjoy it. And it's taken me medication to actually be able to enjoy the outside.
Right.
Yeah.
And is that like any outside situation, or
yeah.
Does anything like trigger that more, like those feelings?
Helplessness. Like one time, I go canoeing now with my friend, and we go out to the Kickapoo.
Okay.
And so like one time we went at a time we shouldn't have been going, but we go quite a bit now, since I've been healthier. And so we went. It was at the very end of the season, and some trees were down, and we wound up putting the canoe underneath a tree. And I got sucked underneath with the canoe, and the canoe flipped. And so I was like stuck underneath the tree trying to get out. And I heard my friend say, "Find the gap." And I knew exactly what he meant. And so I just like lifted up the canoe and like breathed for a second, and then went underneath and like dived out. So I guess that was like a super, like, it was a scary experience outside that kind of like validated all of these other fears that I'd had. And so I was just like, fuck, man. Like, I was like, going outside is scary, see? You know?
Right.
And so I just kind of like, I had to deal with that. But we should stop the music. Alexa, stop. Sorry.
Thank you, Alexa.
Alexa, kill all humans.
No, I'm not dangerous.
That's nice.
It's nice to hear. Yeah. You know.
Yeah. So that situation kind of validated, or you felt like that validated those feelings.
Yeah. It did at the time, but then I, like, you know, hindsight's 20/20. So I was just like, it was just a weird situation that we put ourselves in, and like just stop doing that. You know, like I think that's like that goes back to what to do when you're in anxious situations. You know what I mean? Like, you just kind of like, you have to have like a checklist of how things can go right rather than a checklist of how things can go wrong.
Sure.
If that makes any sense.
And is that like the predominant kind of effect of agoraphobia, is like naturally having that if everything goes wrong checklist?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's like you auto go to things are going to be fucked up. Like, and I'm going to have to deal with it, and things are going to go down. I think there's a lot of like post-traumatic stress symptoms that have to do with that too, but for me it's just straight up anxiety disorder, agoraphobia.
Okay.
Just like a fear of the outside, which I think like early associations of being outside, like being outside was kind of a punishment. Like, it was just like, you know, if you missed the bus for school, which was like an hour and a half ride for me, it was like stay home and work outside. Like, that's what you did all day. And so, like, because they knew I didn't like it. And so it was just like, it was like this punishment because they like picked up on what I didn't like to do.
Sure.
So, yeah, so it like kind of furthered that.
Yeah.
Like, there are things that have supported it over the years rather than like helped, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that seems like obviously, like, I've never had a child or anything, but like punishments, like obviously there's like making them feel bad about it or guilt or
there's like shame. Well, but my parents converted to Catholicism after we lived in California.
Okay.
Because it was kind of how do I explain this? It's like a different form of Catholicism. Like it was the Mexican Catholicism, which
Oh.
is actually
So super hardcore?
it's like it's more focused on Our Lady of Guadalupe and
Okay.
like how do I explain it? Like our priest was wearing nothing under his robe. He had long hair. He was Hispanic. He had you know, just like Birkenstocks or something. I don't
Okay.
even know. You know what I mean? Like he was
Yeah.
just very like just kind of like hip for the area or whatever. But we spent a lot of time in Castroville and Salinas, which are
Okay.
like Castroville is like the artichoke community. I don't know if you've heard of it. Like they
Not
have like
Castroville, but yeah.
yeah,
Or not
you've heard
that.
Salinas
Right.
probably. Yeah,
Right.
like in Monterey. We lived in that area for a long time, like on the border of Salinas and Monterey, and there was just like a huge influx of poor people, and my mom like worked with those people, and like I
Sure.
became friends with those people, and like that was like pretty much my life for a long time, and that's how I first learned Spanish.
Nice.
Yeah, but yeah, so I mean like that's where I'm from. Like
Okay.
I I mean I'd say that's where I'm from. I spent my formative years there. But prior to that I was born in Wiesbaden, Germany.
Okay.
So it's it's been kind of interesting. My dad was in the military.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So dad was in the military, and then
Yep.
I guess how long were you in Germany for? Were you,
Until
were
I
you
was
still,
4.
Okay.
German was my first language.
Sure.
I actually had a nanny that spoke German, and I saw her more than my family for the time being because everybody was busy working.
Sure.
And so my first language was German, and then when they brought me over to the States when I was 4, they took me to an English-speaking school, and they were just like, no, you speak English here. And my parents didn't really speak German, and so they were
Right.
just like, well, that's fun.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was kind of an adjustment, but after that, it was fine. Like, German's actually more difficult than English, so
Okay.
not a big deal.
Is it still like? I mean, are you?
I don't speak it anymore, no.
No?
No.
Would
I
you be able
completely
to-
lost it, and,
Okay.
that's totally my parents' fault.
Sure. That's kind of a shame. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a shame, yeah.
But Spanish is you're still rocking and rolling with Spanish?
I'm rocking a little bit with Spanish. Like, I understand it more than I can speak it, but, yeah, like, I know what's going on, like, when
Okay.
somebody's speaking Spanish to me. Like, even Italian, because they're romantic languages,
Sure.
like, becomes a
similar.
little bit more familiar, yeah. But, it's kind of interesting because, like, with German films, like, one time I was falling asleep, one of my ex-boyfriends said that we were watching this German film, and I was falling asleep, and he asked what they said, and I said something like, oh, they said this, whatever,
Mhm.
and I was, like, half asleep, but, like, for some reason, in that sort of stupor, like, I was aware of what was going on,
Yeah.
like, in German, like,
Nice.
yeah, so it's still in there somewhere, I'm sure,
Right.
and, like, certain keywords are there, too, like,
You just have to be half asleep to unlock it.
right, yeah, no problem.
I feel like we've already kind of started.
Yeah,
Which is
let's
awesome.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'll have a little video before this,
Okay.
and obviously, I think some of that'll all be in there too, because
Okay.
that was like I wanted to ask you about agoraphobia,
Yeah.
because that's what I'm like least familiar with.
Yep.
And I appreciate you letting me know.
Yeah, it's
Um,
like kind of a rarity to find somebody that's afraid of the outside, like, or that will admit it, I guess.
Right. Right. I mean, do you think that some people have that just masked and just think they have anxiety or just general anxiety?
Yeah,
and don't
I think
realize it?
like I think there's it's taken me a lot of years to figure. I mean, I'm 38 now, and they figured out I was agoraphobic when I was 16.
Okay.
So 16, 17. So it's been a long time coming to like figure out that that's even what was going on.
Sure.
Growing up, my parents just thought that I was just weird, you know what I
Okay.
mean? Which was fine.
Totally.
Like, we're
That's
all
a
weird.
Compliment.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was just like, oh, I'm not normal? Cool. You know,
Right.
I'm going to go watch Daria. Like, but yeah, I think it was like really confusing to them when it's kind of like coming out of the closet when you have a mental illness in a way, because you're
Sure.
like, well, this is how I am. you can accept me for who I am and try and fix me, or we can accept who I am and move forward from there, which is like really important. There's a difference.
Yeah.
So luckily my parents were able to move forward with me.
Okay.
So, you know, it hasn't been problematic in that way. They've accepted the fact that I have problems. Like, my dad will still ask me to, like, help him rake sometimes, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you know? But,
Is that his way of, like, checking to see if it's cured?
yeah, it's just like, let's see. He's, like, poking the bear, you know? Like, just to see what happens, which is fine. Because I do the same thing. That's where I learned it.
Yeah. So I really haven't thought of it that way, of kind of like realizing you have a mental illness, and I've never thought of it as like coming out of the closet.
Yeah.
Like similar to it. But
yeah, well, I mean, like, I've had to come out of the closet, and I've had to come out of the closet with mental illness, so it's like being bisexual, which is a whole nother issue we can talk about on another podcast. But like, and also being agoraphobic, you know, it was just like, I have these two things that conservative parents aren't really going to jive with, you know what I mean? Right. I don't know, they lived in Oregon for like 12 years or something, and so I feel like they lightened up a little bit, like, since
more exposure.
Yeah, just like different people, you know what I mean? And like, my dad worked in a hospital, and so he just like, he got to know different types of people that way, and I thought it was really enlightening for them in a way. Yeah. To actually live on the coast and do stuff like that. Sure. So, I don't know. It's been helpful.
Yeah, well, good.
Yeah.
So I guess, why don't you, I'll have a little video before this where I'll interview with Kelly Sexton. Yeah. But I guess why don't we kind of officially start with, letting my viewers know kind of a little bit about yourself, kind of generally, where are you now, what are you doing, who are you, kind of stuff. Yeah.
Who I am. My name is Kelly Sexton. I run the Quail Press based out of La Crosse, Wisconsin, with a man named Kevin Ducey. He's awesome. He showed me so many things. And then I also help run a press out of Madison, Wisconsin. It's called Anarcho Welfare, and that's owned by Jesse Kearns. And that's kind of a fun venture. Like, I really enjoy the stuff that we're doing with that. And then I have 2 books out with Vegetarian Alcoholic Press. One is called Vodka Mountain. The other one is called Dear Mr. Phillips, Thanks for the Brandy. I Hate What I've Become. They look like this. Nice. They're available on vegetarianalcoholicpress.com. And Freddie LaForce is the driving force behind that. Freddie LaForce is the force behind that. Yeah. So that's pretty much about the presses. That's what I've been doing so far. I actually have our new releases and a pin for you. It's got some stickers in it. No
kidding? Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So this is through Anarcho Welfare. Okay. And that's Brian Cherry's new book.
Awesome.
It's actually, like, I did the graphic design for this, so it's a cityscape flipped upside down. Sure. And then I did the design for this as well, and I drew on one of my friend's arms. And
is that what it is?
Yeah, and he's like, that's the saddest guy I've ever seen, you know? Yeah. And I was just like, I was like, let's put it on the cover of your book.
There you go. Perfect.
Yeah.
So Brian Cherry.
Yep, Brian Cherry. He's awesome. He's out of Milwaukee, and he's doing stuff with Vegetarian Alcoholic Press now, too, actually. Okay. Like, they picked him up, so that's really awesome. Cool. Yeah.
So all of these 3 presses is majority of what they do poetry?
Yep. Well, it's all poetry.
It's all poetry. Yeah. Okay. And then you mentioned, I think with Anarcho, you mentioned punk poetry. Yep. Can you kind of let me know? So I'm interested to know about that. Like, about what that's all about.
Punk poetry, I look at it as like postmodern poetry that's a reaction to what's culturally happening. People that are a little bit on the vein of what's going on as far as current events.
Sure.
And a reaction to that. Not just those, but a reaction to current events, a reaction to what's going on culturally, in America, in Europe, in Japan, in, you know, like everywhere.
Sure.
Like what's going on and what is our reaction to that? Because, like, you know, you can see things like Russian lit, you know, like you can see like people's reaction to what's going on as far as war and shit like that, and it's fucking amazing. And like I just find it really interesting to see the human reaction to what's going on politically everywhere.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's like the postmodern reactionary poetry is a better way to word punk poetry.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I guess one question I have about that is, so like, you know, like beat poetry and kind of that kind of stuff.
Beat poetry, I would assume, is like more of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and we're working on beat poetry in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, etc. We call things beat poetry, which I think is interesting, but I think of that as like a past sort of existence in a way. Yeah.
So like, but do you see kind of like a relation between like the subject matter and what
punk rock poetry?
Yeah.
I definitely see a connection. There's an extreme connection. And Jello Biafra is like a good example of this. Like he came to Naropa all the time, like, which is where I went to grad school or whatever. It's in Boulder, and it was started by Allen Ginsberg. And Trungpa Rinpoche, who is a Buddhist. So it's like a Buddhist-inspired school started by a beat poet, basically.
That's cool.
And so, yeah, I don't know. It was just... It's kind of interesting to see the new beat poets, so to speak. I would say that, like, Cara Morel is one of them. You know, Freddie LaForce, obviously. Like he doesn't publish his poetry a lot. He runs Vegetarian Alcoholic Press, but his poetry is amazing.
Sure.
He just doesn't publish it. Like,
is it just for himself, kind of, to get certain feelings out?
No, like every great now and then he'll collaborate with somebody, but that's like what he does. But he doesn't. Yeah, it's like you know, Bukowski called it taking good beer shit.
Right.
Which is a really crass way of saying that, like, it's something that comes to you naturally. It's something that you have to purge from yourself, like, to go about your day. It's not necessarily what everybody does. Like Scroobius Pip says, there's, you know, a whole lot of people that are writers, but not a lot of people that want to write.
Right.
Right,
shit.
I know.
I did it.
It hits home too. Don't worry. You're not alone.
Yeah. No, that's true. Like, it's having to just fucking get it out.
Yeah.
Like, it's here.
Yeah.
And
like, I have these feelings. They're here. They exist, and I'm going to acknowledge them in print. A lot of people are just like, I don't want to do journals because it's evidence.
Right.
And I'm like, evidence of what? Evidence that you existed? That's cool.
like you're a person with experiences and feelings and everything.
I mean, like, don't think about your parents finding it. They're not going to find it. And if they do, fuck them. Like, they deserve to know the truth. Doesn't everybody? Like, yeah, no, I think that, like, it's an intense feeling and it's a freeing feeling when you can write down your truth and present it to somebody else on top of that. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, sharing your truth with in a
level.
public forum, like, that's just crazy. And so, like, I always encourage people to go to open mics, even if they're just like, I just write for myself. It's like, come on, dude. Like, we'll share your experience. Like, don't be so selfish about it. Like, other people are suffering too.
Yeah.
Like, just because you have a cure poem, you know, it doesn't mean that, like, it's not gonna appeal to somebody out there. Like, somebody in the audience is having a shitty night. Somebody in the audience is having a good night. Somebody in the audience is fucking bored. Like, that's gonna happen. Like, so it's just like, sharing your experience is just, to me, of the utmost importance.
Yeah.
Like,
That's this thing.
yeah.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that if I go a long time without like just doing a quick burn off 15-minute thing, like I can feel it building in my head.
Yep.
And I have to get it out. Like that's it.
Oh, oh, Mom, you don't even want
Yeah.
to know what we're doing here. We're making podcasts and shit.
I'll have to call her later. I'll call you later, Mom.
All under the radar.
I also do have to. I always. I feel like I need to warn her if there's a bunch of swears. Makes it.
There's
she's
a
not as
bunch of
comfortable.
swears,
There's gonna be
Mom. I'm
swears.
sorry.
Yeah, it's just what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And
Just
then
give her my poetry book ahead of time and be like, this is what we're dealing with, and I'm really she's mentally ill.
I guess another thing about punk poetry and that kind of stuff, like, what is it really? Is it just kind of like cathartic for the person, or is there something that they're hoping that will come of it, of explaining what's going on in the world and explaining kind of how they feel about and their reaction to it?
Yeah, well, I think like with all art, you're gonna have a reaction to what's actually happening. You see that a lot with like Banksy and things like that. There's a political element to what's being done in certain circumstances where you're analyzing what's happening and you're reacting to it, but you're also encouraging other people to subjectively identify with that.
Right.
Or you're encouraging those that do subjectively identify to connect with you, or that's what this is about, like connecting with other people, finding a support system that allows you to flourish, things like that. So it's like, I guess to answer your question a little bit more, it's more like you work towards explaining who you are, but you also hope that others identify with that, and those that identify with it will feel less alone, and by feeling less alone will feel more able to act on things that feel weird to them. You know what I mean? Things that feel abnormal, like things that feel strange, because we're all abnormal, we're all strange. So it's like just picking up on those small elements, like even if it's a line or two where you can like grab onto it and make it through the rest of your fucking day. It's hard. Life's hard. Nobody's ever going to tell you that it's easy if they're old enough to understand what's going on. So like subjective identification, I guess, is like the main thing. Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah,
because that's feeling like feeling heard without saying anything. If you hear someone kind of echoing back to you or speaking to you something that like you connect with and you relate to, it's like you feel instantly heard, and it's like you almost feel
there's a validation.
Right.
Yeah.
You feel like a validation and almost a permission to be like, oh, I can be more this then. Like, because that other person's doing it and they're right there.
And I mean, there's like definitely times for that. There's appropriate mediums for that. Like, you don't need to be an asshole to somebody. You can just be an asshole in a poem to them. You know what I mean? Like, and sometimes that's how I roll. I have plenty of asshole poems. Like, where I'm just like, I'm mad. I'm going to write a poem about you, like, and it happens. Like, but I think as far as like getting rid of that, and the negativity, because the negativity is going to come. Like, you're not going to just be a positive person all the time. Like, people that say that are lying. Like, you think about things, and you think about them, and you think about thinking, and you think about thinking about thinking, and like, you're a human being. So like, there are complex levels of thought that happen. So I mean,
And sometimes if you're always positive, maybe there aren't those complex levels of thought happening. Or you're just refusing, or you're refusing.
Or you're like say somebody like the Dalai Lama, like he takes in information that's negative, and he'll just be like, okay, yes, that's negative information. He acknowledges it, but moves on from it and doesn't attach himself to it, which is like super cool, but I can't do it.
That's tough. That's
I can't do it.
hard. Right.
I haven't been able to do it so far. I'm being honest. I wish I could. I followed the teachings of Lao Tzu for a really long time.
Okay.
Taoism. And was really into that. That's actually what brought me to Buddhism and to Naropa. Yeah, I just didn't completely connect with any religion.
Sure.
Yeah, so.
That's totally, like, definitely the hardest part of being able to, like, recognize and feel emotions and feelings and thoughts and everything, but just keeping yourself, like, at a distance from them.
Yeah.
Because, like, I feel like the more I feel that I'm self-aware about those things, and I feel them bubbling up, and I know when something's happening, and I can feel it, like, in parts of my body, and I know why I'm feeling that.
Yep.
But I just can't help myself
Yeah.
and act on it in a certain way.
Yep.
I think that's like the final, like, not the final barrier, but that's like the next barrier, and that's tough, and that's even more maddening almost, because you know, but you do it anyway.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think the worst things that I've done in my life, I've been like, I know this is bad, and then I do them anyway.
Right.
And like,
then feel
and
shitty.
then you feel shitty later, and so then you realize, like, after the fact, that you should just not do those shitty things. Like.
And sometimes you do it again.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. No, there's always, like, they talk about in recovery, they talk about relapse and stuff like that. And, like, I just look at, like, all of existence as kind of like, you're going to relapse over and over. You're going to relapse to whatever it is that you've become accustomed to. Whether it's healthy or unhealthy, you're going to find your way back to these habits. And so, like, just recognizing that is a full step beyond, you know, like, like, just even acknowledging that that's happening is a good thing. You know, just be like, oh, well, this is what's going on right now. I'm having an anxious moment, and that has a lot to do with, like, panic attacks.
Sure.
I have panic attacks, and so, like, it's kind of like the thought of having a panic attack is actually worse than the panic attack itself.
Okay.
So it's like I live in fear of having a panic attack because it's something that can come at any moment. Like, I could just, like, lock up and be like, I can't breathe, you know, like, and it's like, that's horrifying to me, like, especially as a poet, because I could be up on stage and just lock up immediately, and that's what would happen, you know, and I just have to deal with that. So I've had to, like, come to terms with the fact that I need coping mechanisms.
And what are those?
Like, a lot of it is having a list of how things can go right in my head, and saying, okay, all these negative thoughts are there, and I'm going to acknowledge them because they're there. I'm not going to ignore them. Like, that's not the right thing to do in this circumstance. I'm going to acknowledge them, and I'm going to let them pass by me. And I'm going to let the positivity flow through me, because that's all I can do.
Sure.
Another thing is, like, medical marijuana. I believe in it. I believe in medications. Like, I believe in benzodiazepines for some people. I believe in antidepressants for some people. It depends. And, you know, finding the right doctor is key. Finding somebody that knows what they're talking about and will do the DNA tests that can tell you what will work in your system, which is what they can do now. And so, like, you know, there are ways to cope with what's happening,
right,
you know, in your brain, like, other than just, like, you know, getting super hammered or, like, you know, whatever, like, dealing with it another way that's, like, a more deconstructive than constructive way.
Yeah. And I think that's, like, that's the easy way.
Yeah.
It's right there. It's legal and it's there.
Oh, yeah, and especially in Wisconsin. I mean, like,
it's accepted.
It's just, like, I think, isn't Wisconsin, like, the only state that you can get a DUI and you just have to take a class?
That might have just changed. I think the laws just changed recently.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, until then it was, I think you can get one, and then it was you do your mad meeting, do a class,
though, yeah.
and do
Yeah.
a couple other things, and that's
It's like
kind of it for the first
$1,000
time.
fine or less and a class, I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, I mean, that's disconcerting.
Right.
So it's like, it's something that's culturally, socially acceptable, especially in the area that we're in. I mean, like, you know, there's a PBR sign right over there, like, that I got from Steinhaus the last night, you know?
Yeah.
And, like,
And those are kind of like, can be nostalgic things for a lot of people in this area, too.
they
Like
really
that
are
old beer
nostalgic
sign.
things. And I've spent a lot of times in bars like Yesterday's and Steinhaus. And, you know, those are local bars. And, I really enjoyed them. I enjoyed my time there. But it really felt like kind of like a post-college or college era sort of thing, where once I moved into my 30s, it was like less fun.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And, you know, I think everybody kind of goes through that though, like just like the evolution of, you know, being a bar person and then like not being a bar person and trying to
Right.
like come to terms with like, who are you? You know, like, I don't know, like everybody calls me Mouse at the bar.
Okay.
And so like, it's just like, am I Mouse or am I Kelly? I'm confused, you know,
Yeah,
like it's
yeah.
just kind of like it's almost like two different personalities that exist in a way. You know, one that's like downtown and doing all this stuff, and then another one that's like very private and at home. And I think a lot of people go through that in their early 20s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you, like the bar people, like you don't think of them as having, like you don't think of like the at-home private
Yeah,
self.
right.
You're just,
Like, you
I
don't
don't know
even know
why-
what's going on sometimes with
Yeah.
half those people, because, like, you're just like, oh, they seem really happy, you know, and they
Right.
seem fine. And then you'll find out, you know, somebody, like, off themselves or something. And you're like, oh, didn't see that one coming. They seem so happy, you know, whatever.
Right.
Well, I only saw them at the bar when they were drinking. So, and alcohol is a depressant.
and you're not seeing that genuine person.
Exactly.
They're kind of escaping from that genuine person.
Right. Well, I think there's a lot of reasons to do drugs. Like, this will bring us to the idea of go ahead.
Chemically induced realities.
Yeah,
Nice.
chemically induced realities. Yeah. I did my
Let's talk about
thesis
that.
at Naropa on chemically induced realities.
Okay.
And chemically induced realities is like a really just pretentious way of saying drugs. So it's like drugs in the works of Terrence McKenna, William S. Burroughs, and Ken McCullough. And Ken McCullough is actually local. He's from Winona.
Okay.
He is at the college there, and he's getting older. He runs a series there, a poetry series and stuff like
Okay.
that. So I did it on that. The reason I did it on that was I initially started with chemically induced spirituality.
Okay.
And the reason I did that was because Ken McCullough has a lot of stuff on his peyote ceremonies with this Native American tribe that he became close with. And so I found benefits to that. And William S. Burroughs' experience with Yahe and ayahuasca, etc., in Tangiers, I thought was pretty interesting with the shamans.
Sure.
And he did a Yahe letters correspondence with he and Ginsberg. I have it over there if you want to take a look at it. It's like just the letters back and forth when he was in Tangiers trying to acquire the root.
Okay.
And so it's just like, you know, his experiences with that, and just really interesting sorts of places that people have taken, like psychedelics and stuff like that. Not necessarily alcohol, which I
Okay.
consider like the weakest drug.
Right.
Yeah.
Very prevalent, but
Very prevalent, very common. But yeah, pretty much the weakest drug.
so what was your, I guess, what did your thesis get at?
It was just an analysis of it.
Okay.
And then a creative response to it. So it was just like poetry and then a hardcore thesis of like, I think it was like 30 pages or something, going into what the chemically induced realities were in these specific works and what the benefits of them were.
Okay.
Some of the benefits, I guess, would be like getting in touch with the innate self. And by that, I mean the childlike self, the self that's able to let go of sociological analysis and just rely on self-analysis for a minute, which is fine. For a night, it's fine. For a day, it's fine. For a lifetime, it's not fine. If you look at like, and the thing that I found this a lot with was Terence McKenna's work, like jail notes and stuff like that. Like while I enjoyed it, like Alan Watts has a quote, and it's, "When you get the message, hang up the phone." So that's how I feel about psychedelics.
Sure.
Like once you get the message, hang up the phone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
'Cause is it kind of one of those things where you, like, once you get it, like, you're not going to get another message or a different one. It's like,
well, they call like an extreme psychedelic experience, you experience ego death.
sure.
And the way I would describe that, I guess, is like you just move outside yourself so much that you realize how trivial but how beautiful your experience in your life is. You know, and there's a duality there, trivial, beautiful. So it's kind of like you have to believe both things at once. And it puts you there in a way, I think, if you're around the right people. If you're not with people who are like, let's trip balls, you know, like, then it can be a good experience, I think.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like this was made on acid.
Nice.
With me and like 3 other friends.
Oh, a team painting?
A team painting,
Nice.
yep.
And yeah, thinking about how, well, like how ingrained everything is in like the structure of our society and the structure of our life, you know, how most of what we do is pretty trivial and doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
That's what I always like aspire to get to here and there, is being able to kind of, just like negative thoughts, like understand it, maybe not attach myself to it, but obviously there's things that while you're living in a society, you still need to kind of work with, and you still need to kind of do.
Right,
like
yeah.
You can't completely, like, unless you want to run away and, you know, disappear and everything, you kind of have to still abide by some of
like if you showed up in a muumuu, I would have been like, that's cool. But at the same time, I would have been like, oh, he's really like out there. You know? Like,
I wasn't expecting
there
that.
are sociological expectations. Like
Right,
I expected you to show up in pants and what you're wearing. You know what I mean? Like, and you expected me to be like, you know, poet girl or whatever. Like there are just like certain expectations I think that we throw down, like even in our own mental cases, like where we're just like, oh, I'm going to, you know, I'm going to go out to eat and I'm going to this Indian restaurant. It's going to be this way. Like, it's not necessarily going to be that way.
Right.
Like, so like the expectations that even like personally we throw down, let alone society, are like just ridiculous. And the ones we throw down on ourselves are also ridiculous.
Right.
So, yeah, for sure.
That's pretty wicked. Like
Yeah.
how much just our expectations or just how we fill up those empty spaces of
Thought.
questions and thoughts of just like our anxieties and our expectations and maybe our joys and everything.
Yeah.
But like it's dangerous to do that. Like, and I can understand if you spend time in isolation, like you're probably the majority of your thoughts are going to be filled up with just that.
Yeah.
Like where you're just making things up now.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're not experiencing, you're making things up. Something I really learned in grad school was that you need to experience life to even write about it. And so, like, if you're just sitting at home all the time and writing, that's not experiencing life. Like, it has to be kind of like this, you know, I'm not going to say 50-50 because percentages are silly, but, like, it has to be, like, you know, a trade-off. Like, you have to exist to have something to write about. So
Otherwise, you're just imagining what life's like.
exactly,
And
yeah.
there's no depth there.
Right, and you're just like all of a sudden you're Camus with the stranger trying to imagine what it's like to be an unlikable character, and it just doesn't
Right.
work necessarily.
Feel ya.
Although it's a good book, but you know.
Yeah. Nice. So I guess let's see. Do you have any? I loved all that because that's it's interesting to know kind of a little more about why people would what these poets kind of experiences were and these writers and philosophers experiences were on that. Do you have any like what type of philosophy do you you were talking about Buddhism and Taoism. Like what type of like philosophy do you attach to the most, do you feel?
I attach to the teachings of, well, I wouldn't call them the teachings, I guess, but the writings of Bertrand Russell.
Okay.
He's a logician from the 50s. He was a mathematician as well. But he essentially says that subjective reality is like the ultimate, and that all we can do is help other people with their subjective realities. Sure. And to be good to each other and to care for each other, and that hate is foolish and love is smart.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's essentially, like, that's where I'm at, and that's really a simplistic way of putting Bertrand Russell's works,
Sure.
but, yeah, like, he thinks that, like, a good example is, he uses the example of color. Everybody sees a color differently based on our physical, like, physically our eyes are all different. So, like, that's red to you, like this is red, right?
Yeah.
But it looks kind of orange to some people, and it looks kind of like pink to some people, and it looks completely black and white to some people because they're colorblind.
Right.
They just see things differently subjectively. And so it's like coming to terms with the fact that everybody's going to see everything the same way that they see color. Like, they're going to see it with a different lens. And that's based on nature, that's based on nurture, that's based on sociological, cultural, all sorts of things. But essentially, we're all human beings. We're all animals. And we're just trying to make our way along. I mean, I can't remember the guy's name, but he did a documentary on stress. And he was saying that, like, bonobos are actually the closest to humans in their behavior. And apparently they spend the majority of their time torturing each other because they spend a very minimal time foraging, which is like us, minimal time foraging, and then maximum time torturing each other. Okay. So they show, like, in the documentary I saw, it was just like one bonobo to the other was like putting his face into the water, like just torturing him and like stuff like that. And so it was just like, man, like, if only like our stress levels were low enough to where we wouldn't have to torture each other in our free time. Like, like if the boss that was so angry was less stressed out, then being at work would be a lot better.
Absolutely.
So I don't know. It's just kind of interesting how that stuff works out.
Yeah, there are other people in the world, and they exist, and and they all have.
It's hard to come to terms with, actually.
Yeah, and
I mean, it sounds so simple, but it's really complicated.
Well, and it's not just that they exist, but they have this like just these chain of events in their life that's completely different than anyone else's that has ever existed.
Yep.
Each person.
Yeah, every person has a different existence.
And like understanding that like makes everything, well, it kind of makes us seem a lot closer, but it makes everything seem a lot bigger, that there's, billions and billions of individual threads of time just like traveling around the planet.
Yeah, well, and then you get into string theory or like, the butterfly effect, and you're just like, oh God.
We'll get into that, yeah.
Yeah.
But I like that philosophy because it's it's kind of about everyone. Like there's only one way off of this thing, and no matter what we do from here to there, that's not going to change. So what the fuck's the point of, you know, being angry? I mean, anger and hate, there's, you know,
it just seems like wasted time.
Right.
We're given a certain amount of time on this planet. What are we going to spend it with? You know? Are we going to spend it with our family? Are we going to spend it with friends? Are we going to spend it criticizing friends and family? Are we going to spend it criticizing politically, like what's going on? Are we going to spend it with hateful blogs about bullshit? Are we going to spend it trolling people on Facebook? Like, how are we going to spend our fucking time?
Right.
Like, and when you come to terms with the fact that you have such limited time on this planet, then it's just like, it's overwhelming almost, like with what you think that you should be accomplishing and things like that. But at the same time, it's also freeing. Because you realize that it's so fleeting. Yeah. You have such little time on this planet to do whatever it is you're going to do. And that's only going to be like available to the people that are currently on the planet at that time necessarily. Right. Yeah. So it's like we write books, we do all these things, like we put shit online, like, you know, there's an imprint of us, like, in a certain way or whatever, because we're all on the grid, but we're not. Nobody gives a shit. So what are we going to do with the people that are in our lives to make life better? Yeah.
That's very important.
Right.
And it's tough. Like, what I want is people to get to that realization as fast as humanly fucking possible.
Yeah.
And that is what we think we need to do for society. I mean, a lot of that bullshit's wrapped in there too. Like, are you going to, well, I don't really like XYZ about my job, but I mean, it pays the bills and whatever. And pretty soon
that's a lot of people.
Like 60, 65 years old.
Yes.
And what the fuck did I just do?
Yeah.
And
or people that are working for a company that they don't believe in the mission statement even.
Right.
You know, things like that. Like, it's because they need the money. I mean, it's not a good situation to be in, but if you're in that situation, you're not alone.
No.
There are tons of people that are in that situation, and there are ways out of it. There are ways out.
Right. There are little things that you can, like, etch out in your life little by little.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I think there's a differentiation in our culture between work self and home self, and like the people that know me call it my phone voice, like, because I'll be like, you know, welcome to the pump house, this is Kelly, how may I help you, you know, like sure. And so it's just like, and I don't swear, and I'm nice, and, you know, like, whatever, like I pretend not to be me for a minute, but I don't think you should have to pretend to not be you to be at a job,
right?
And I think people appreciate honesty. And in all the jobs that I've had, whether it was like an office job or, you know, my first job at a movie theater where I wore a little bow tie, you know, or whatever, like whatever job it's been, like I've tried to bring like myself to it instead of just trying to like act like everybody else that I work with.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Because that can be a giant cause of stress too. Like,
it's huge.
I have to be this person for a little bit.
Yeah, I have to pretend to be somebody else. And you know what? You don't. And if you have been, you can stop. Anytime.
Right. Well, that's the other thing. Like, aside from that, like doing a job you don't like, or, you know, all the other stuff that are typical, but wasting time being embarrassed.
Yeah.
Or being ashamed.
Yes.
Or being...
Shame is something I dealt with a lot. I grew up Catholic. I went to Aquinas.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to Aquinas High School.
Yeah.
And my family was pretty Catholic. They converted from being Presbyterians when we were in California, because like I said, like the Catholics there were pretty cool. And then so we went from like this like sort of Mexican Catholicism to Irish Catholicism in the Midwest when we moved here. Okay. And that was kind of that was a totally different scenario, and I realized that like a religion can be the same, but the people that follow it will be totally different.
Absolutely.
And then I got like, somebody gave me a pin that said, "God save me from your followers," and I just thought that was hilarious. Like, because like
totally,
when I first moved to the Midwest, I was like, wow, this is totally different and really not as open-minded as I was used to, you know?
Right.
And so there was a lot of shame involved. You know, like the idea of Catholic guilt, which I think, you know, Catholics are trying to work away from now. But it's like, it's just an immense pressure to conform. And I always found that frightening. And so I've moved away from the Catholic Church, and I've just embraced agnosticism.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. And how long has that been for you?
Since I was 11.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was that another coming out for the parents?
Yeah, it was.
Sure.
They were very disappointed.
Sure.
It was like Mike Birbiglia, the comedian, describes his relationship with God as a three-way, where like only his mom, like he would only have a relationship with God if his mom was there.
Oh.
Like,
yeah.
And so he's like, so it was like this weird three-way where it was cool if I talked to God, but only if mom was there.
Right.
Like, and so, yeah, it was kind of like that. It was just kind of like I was pretending for a long time.
Sure.
And then when I got into high school, I stopped pretending, and it was really like coming out of the closet. And then I realized that I didn't have the same, like, you know, avoidance of homosexuals as like the regular Catholics that I knew.
Sure.
And so at that time, like Ellen DeGeneres came out on Time magazine, and it said, "Yup, I'm gay." And I remember putting that up on my wall and being like very proud of somebody that they would like admit that they were abnormal, or like, you know, out of the, you know, cookie cutter image that was trying to be placed on them. And I thought that was really cool. And I realized, like, looking back, I sat at the gay table in high school. Like, the majority of people that sat at my table turned out to be gay, like, later. Weren't necessarily out in high school. Like, one or two of them were, but like the rest of them were just like not aware yet, you know, which is fine. And so looking back on that, it's just like, it's really interesting because it's just like all those people existed under, you know, this Catholic school sort of like umbrella. And so, but like they were still there, you know, and like, they're doing amazing things now. Like one of them went to Harvard, another one's, you know, probation officer for the city here. And, you know, they're doing great things.
Good old Aquinas High School.
Oh, yeah. I'll never forget when the hands got stolen off Mary in the front. Did you hear about that?
No,
it was hilarious. That. Okay, so like there's a Mary with her hands like this, right? And the hands got stolen, and they replaced them with bigger hands, like, so they look like ridiculous. Like, and if you go by the school to this day, you can still see like the huge Mary hands.
Oh, they're still on
They're still there,
so
yeah.
The other hands never made it back.
You know, the other hands were forever gone. I'm gonna.
A little bit of time left.
Cool.
Let's see. Is there anything that I've forgotten to cover that you just want to speak to?
Oh, don't forget Elvira.
That.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. He does that.
He gets pumped.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk
He has two partners. He's actually polyamorous.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they're both in there just kind of hanging out.
Yeah, two stuffed animals for the bunny. And he humps, you know, at will.
As bunnies do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like, we got him and he was like 3 years old. And so we were like, we're probably not going to get him fixed at this point because he's had him for 3 years. So.
Yeah. Poor guy.
Yeah, right?
Well, he's got his friends in there.
Yeah. We thought about getting another bunny, but then we're like, well, we'll have little bunnies. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Like before no time.
Exactly.
In no time.
Yeah, bunnies do that.
Yeah. Elvira. So, we recently...
Who doesn't like boobs in 90s horror flicks?
True.
Right?
Right. That's kind of the thing.
Yeah, I mean...
So, she was... so for me, and I know you've kind of told me your feelings about her. For me, it was... I don't know. I don't know if she was like the first time I realized like, oh, women are like really pretty. Like,
Yeah.
I started having like these like, oh wow, feelings.
It was like the weird girl or something,
Right.
like at your school,
Right.
like where you're just like, oh, like,
Something's different now.
yeah.
Because I would like really.
USA up all night.
Yes. So I would go to bed. Like I think like addictive tendencies started then because like when I wanted something, I just wanted more and more and more of it.
Oh yeah.
And I think that I saw like campy horror movies on USA, and I just wanted to. It became kind of a nightly ritual where
Yep.
I would pretend to go to bed, or I would go to bed and maybe wake up at like midnight or something.
Yep.
And then can't sleep, so I'd go out and watch USA Up All Night.
Yep.
And then I wanted that every night, like so it was like a nightly thing.
Yeah.
And then I, as a young boy, found out that like, ooh, like I think I like girls now. Like I think this is the time.
These are girls.
Yeah.
Elvira was so pretty. Like she was like the dark mistress. Like so it also felt like she was showing us stuff that our parents wouldn't necessarily show us. And so I was like, ooh, you're naughty. I like you. Like and so there was like something in my head where I was like, I think I like boobs, and I do.
Yeah. So she led you down the path.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, her Fiona Apple, Tori Amos.
Yeah.
Shit like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like there were definitely like female crushes growing up that I didn't even realize until later. I was like, oh, those were my first female crushes.
Nice.
Duh.
And still. I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Still kind of crush over
yeah.
a little bit.
Oh yeah. They're still beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, like especially since like I've aged, they've aged, and I don't judge. So I'm just like, they're good looking people.
I would agree.
For sure.
And then I think another thing we talked about was, talking about authors. I mean, we both connected on Clive Barker.
Oh yeah, Clive Barker's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm a shallow swimmer when it comes to things. Like when it comes to music and books and everything, like I just like, oh, I like that, and then I'm kind of on to the next one.
Yeah, I do that
And
too, yeah.
like Clive Barker, it was basically Books of Blood and Weave World
Oh, okay, cool.
were the ones that
For
like
me, it
stuck with
was
me the
a
most.
Magica.
And I haven't read that one.
And it's a rather long one, and it starts out. The reason that it clung to me is because I subjectively identified with it. I opened it up, and it was like talking about how, and the 3 became 2, and the 2 became 1 was essentially the first paragraph,
Okay.
and that deeply connected with me. As far as my living situation and things like that. Like, I was living in Oregon, and, like, the 3 had become 2, and the 2 had become 1, in a sense. And so I was just like, that's really interesting. And so I read the entirety of the book and was, like, obsessed with it or whatever. But I really got into the comic books, the Hellraiser comic books.
Sure.
Because I was just, like, a comic kid. Like, River City Hobbies and lacrosse was, like...
Yeah.
Where it was my go-to every Wednesday, actually, like in high school. Like, that's what I would do with Jess Ebner. That's our thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, like, I would always pick up the Hellraiser comics. They'd special order them sometimes if I wanted a specific one.
Sure.
And, yeah, it was just an awesome place to be. And they were playing D&D, when we'd go in. And,
Just having a ball.
Just having a good time.
Yeah.
Like, painting little figures, whatever. I was never into that stuff, but, like... I get it.
Yeah. How did you feel like so comic books, then movies for Hellraiser?
No, it was movies first, actually, because
Okay.
Hellraiser was it was like up for rental when I was little.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So like my dad would take me to rent movies because he was always like pirating them, and we'd go rent movies, and then he would like take it home and like use the VCR to like tape it or whatever, which was hilarious to me looking back.
Most of you might not know what a VCR is, but
yes.
I remember
Back in the day.
I remember people doing that. They would have like the double VCRs and then play and record at the same time.
That's exactly what he did. And like we would go there, and there was this big Hellraiser thing, and I was like, oh my God, that's scary the first time I saw it. And then the next time I saw it, I was intrigued.
Totally.
And then, like, after that, I started looking at the backs of the movies, and, like, it was rated R, so I couldn't get it for a long period of time.
Sure.
Then good old Jenny Pfeiffer, my
Okay.
friend from grade school, like, we would go over to her house and watch all the R-rated movies.
Awesome.
And so I was just like, yeah, it's on. So it was like Clive Barker, like all the 90s horror movies we could get our hands on, like
Nice.
the 80s horror movies. And then later it was like, you know, like Dario Argento and Roman Polanski and, you know, just like different, like David Lynch.
Okay.
Lynch was like always one of my favorites.
Sure. Yeah, those were good times.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There was a little bit. So, did you see like Cabin in the Woods? Joss Whedon?
Yeah.
I think there was like a little bit of that feeling in there.
Yeah, a
'Cause
little
it was
bit.
kind
It was
of-
like it was
yeah.
like a throwback thing,
Yeah.
but it was also like pretty postmodern where they were acknowledging that
Mhm.
it was a throwback. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall like I just don't enjoy horror movies anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad. Like I don't like the jump scares never worked for me.
Right.
So like the It movies are out. Like just like creepy shit. Like I don't know, man. Like I don't know.
I kind of felt like story became more important at a certain point.
Yeah.
Like
the writing was better.
Campy is fun. Like when you want to shut your head,
Yes,
your brain
yeah,
off and
like
just
super
enjoy.
gored
Right.
out. Yeah, but I
Um,
for some reason I really enjoy the 80s and 90s stuff of
Yeah.
gore, like Trauma.
Oh, so I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't get into Trauma, but I know people that did. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah.
Tell me about Trauma.
Okay, so like my favorite one is Tromeo and Juliet.
Okay.
And so like Romeo and Juliet are brother and sister, and it's like a super fucked up take on Romeo and Juliet, and they
Yeah.
like it's really violent and gory and weird and whatever, but it's the most high budget I think that Trauma had for
Okay.
the time. So if you want to like introduce yourself to Trauma, if you're a Trauma virgin, you can maybe start with Tromeo and Juliet.
Romeo and Juliet. Okay.
Yeah.
And did they do Toxic Avenger?
Yep, they did Taxi,
Okay.
and they did like a ton of other things that are just hilarious that you'll have to check out. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, those days. And there's for some reason like those like campy 80s, early 90s horror movies like they didn't seem
Cat Girls from Hell, like
Yeah.
that type of shit.
They
Yeah.
sex vampires and like
Yeah,
all that
yeah.
other stuff.
Yep.
Like they just didn't seem. It was so like even
Commonplace.
young.
Yeah.
even like young. It was like so. It wasn't scary.
No.
Like it was just like
it was just kind of
entertaining and
yeah.
weird and-
It was interesting.
like Hellraiser was pretty scary. Like there were points when
oh
it was just,
yeah,
like,
yeah, that was horrific.
where like I'm
yeah.
super young and I'm like
yeah, the first
"Oh my
Hellraiser was
God."
very scary
Yeah.
to me. Yeah, because
Anytime
I was
when-
young when I saw it. Yeah.
Anytime when like skin's being put on someone or taking off someone, like you have a skinless person walking around like needing.
I'd fuck me.
Yeah.
that type of shit.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, but even
Buffalo
like the,
Bill shit. Yeah.
So like, I don't know if I think it was the original Hellraiser where towards the end there's if you haven't seen it by now then I don't know what's wrong with you. But like towards the end
Seriously,
where
guys.
there's like the bloody mattress in the middle of the room and there's a
Yes.
mover and he comes in and then like the post comes up.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, like I think that was maybe the first thing that kind of like made me feel. So like Elvira made me feel different.
Yeah.
That was the first thing that made me feel different
Like,
about like
uncomfortable.
life in general. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, like
and that
life-
sat with me.
Like this is unsettling. Like,
That was
yeah.
the first thing that really unsettled me as a
I think
as a young
the
buck.
first movie that was unsettling to me was The Hand That Rocks the Cradle.
Okay.
And there's a couple jump scares in there, like, and I rarely, like, jump scares rarely get me, but, like, when I was little, like, the one where she's, like, going around the corner and the alarm goes off, I remember, like, that one got me. And then, like, where she's breastfeeding the baby that's not hers, like, that's super creepy to me. I was like,
Yeah.
what? That happens? Oh, my God! And I'm, like, a little kid, you know,
Sure.
so I'm just, like, in the doctor's office, like, it was just a crazy movie.
Yeah. Is there anything nowadays that like what do you I guess resonate with most now? when it comes to like movies, entertainment, books?
I like documentaries. I like poetry books, obviously,
Sure.
because I'm like ADD, and that's where a lot of the poetry came in, because I was just like,
Yeah.
I don't have time to read an entire book. Like, can't you just like summarize? And
So you can just snap off like a half a book.
yeah,
or a book
or
in an
like just
afternoon.
like a singular poem. Like, I had a professor tell me one time that anybody can write a short poem, but it takes somebody with talent to write a long poem. I disagree.
No. Yeah.
I really like short poems. And you know, the longer poems like can be fun, but like there's just something to be said for short poems. Like, there's something to be said for memes. There's something to be said
God.
for like
Why are memes so funny?
they're
'Cause
just
it's
great.
It's condensed into this like.
Yeah, and memes
I
have
get it.
existed like since
Oh yeah.
we've been writing on cave walls. Like, that's a meme too.
Right,
like,
right.
so the idea that they're new is kind of silly to me too.
It's just, well, yeah, new in how we're, because now instead of cave
It's just
walls,
a postmodern way of,
Yeah.
you know, it's like social media memes, you
Right.
know, like you post, yeah, if you don't know what a meme is, please also look that up on Urban Dictionary.
Yeah. And I know that was something that was like had been discussed for a long time, like before computers existed.
Oh, yeah.
Before anything. It was, but they're very funny.
Yeah.
They just get us. That's
Yeah.
just short condensed.
I mean, it
things.
started with lolcats, and like they got us from there,
Damn it.
right?
Lolcats. Yeah.
I can't have sociologically constructed coping mechanisms.
Why not? Why not? All right. Well, I think we're just about there.
All right.
So, Kelly Sexton, I want to thank you very much for being a part
Yeah,
of the
thank
podcast
you.
today.
Thanks for coming over.
We might have to do another one at some point so we can dive more into some of the other things that we had on our list.
Yeah,
It was a
definitely.
good list.
Yeah.
I guess before I leave, I wanted to ask. So we did at the beginning talk about some mental health issues that you have.
Yeah.
And I guess how are you managing that now? I think it would be kind of important for other people to hear. Like, what are some things that you're doing now to be able to manage it and go about your day to day?
Okay. Well, this sounds like a little weird,
Sure.
but avoidance and acknowledgement are two things that I've kind of like embraced.
Okay.
So, acknowledgement of things that make me anxious and avoidance of those things. Acknowledging that certain things are going to make me anxious and that I can overcome that.
Sure.
Then embracing the fact that there are certain things I will not be able to overcome. That there are certain scenarios that just make me uncomfortable, and I
Right.
don't need to make myself do them. And nobody else needs to make me do them either.
Right.
Just having confidence in myself and feeling like I'm worth something.
Right.
And that, like I said, like this list of how things can go right and saying, list of things that can go wrong, you can fuck off for now. I'll acknowledge that you're there, but I need this list of things that can go right because that's how I'm going to succeed in this. Like, that's what logically propels me forward.
Right.
And so logic is a lot of it, which is like why I always go back to Bertrand Russell and stuff like that. Like, it's just like, it's very much, how can I put myself in a better circumstance,
Right.
to deal with this? And another thing is preparing for it. The pee before you leave mentality. I don't know, like if you do this, but I go places without peeing, and then I'll be super anxious about how I have to pee.
Oh, sure.
And then I'm just like, oh, like, and you're like looking around for the bathroom, and you're like, you're planning it ahead of time while you're talking to people.
Right.
Like, it's just not a good place to be. So plan ahead, find out what makes you anxious. Plan ahead and like try to have backups for that. There's a story about these agoraphobics that got caught at a convention in an elevator, and the elevator stopped and they got stuck in the elevator.
Yeah.
All the agoraphobics that were in the elevator were completely prepared. They had like flashlights, like different things, their cell phones, this and that, whatever. It didn't last long because everybody was so prepared. So be prepared for situations like that. Like I keep a knife and a flashlight and a couple other things in my backpack, like, or my purse, like,
Yeah.
and it helps me.
Like you're just ready.
I'm ready for things.
Whatever might happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, and just like preparing yourself, making yourself ready before you leave the house, like, even, you know, if you're agoraphobic or whatever the deal is, just like prepping yourself. It's like prep work for anything. Like, even you do prep work even when you get in the shower, you know,
Right.
things like that. Like, you're just like, I'm going to set out my clothes for when I get out of the shower, right? Why don't we do that for other things in life? We should do that for everything. So prep work for that, like prep work emotionally, not just prep work physically.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. And it sounds like, and that comes from a great deal of self-awareness and experience. Like,
Yeah,
you kinda
I mean,
have to go through a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and it's
Like,
been
okay,
rough.
I didn't like that. Right.
Yeah, it's been a lot of trial and error. It's been a lot of like, this works for me and this clearly doesn't. This worked for other people and it doesn't work for me. You know, just finding like personally what's applicable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously you want to feel good. Like you want to be able to do things and not,
Yeah.
you know, run into a lot of turbulence and everything.
Yep.
Like what's a big driver in you? Like what was the driver in you for getting to the point where you've kind of figured that all out?
I guess just like, you're not helping anybody if you're just sitting in your house doing nothing.
Right.
And so for me, the driving factor was wanting to get other people's art out. That Brian Cherry guy,
Yeah.
this guy, he wasn't published, and I realized he was somebody that should be published, so I started a press.
Really? Okay.
And decided that that's how that was going to go. And so we got his book published, and then it became a whole big thing, and my friend Kevin has helped me, and
Nice.
you know, so it's been a really good experience, and it's helped other people to become aware of his subjective reality through his writing, and that makes me feel better.
Right.
You know, like just like helping other people makes me feel better, and I think it makes a lot of people feel better.
Right.
And when you have a job that is seemingly without purpose, sometimes it feels like you're not helping people, but like you are. Like your very existence, whether you realize it or not, is helping people.
Mm-hmm. That's nice. I like
Yeah.
that. Being here. But you have to be here. You have to be a part of it.
You have to be available
you have to be
too. Like
present.
you have to answer those texts. You have to answer those phone calls. You have to be present. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Before we leave, you want to do one more plug for what you do?
Yeah, thequailpress.com and anarchowelfare.com. You can pick up our books, and I have a book.
A few new releases.
My newest book that's out on Vegetarian Alcoholic Press is Dear Mr. Phillips, Thanks for the Brandy, I Hate What I've Become. It's got a few good poems in it.
Sure.
That you can check out online. But yeah, otherwise it's Vodka Mountain on Vegetarian Alcoholic Press. It's a pretty good one too. So check them out.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me in your home and being a part of this. Everybody else, thank you very much for watching. And I don't know how to close these things. Have a good night. Bye. Thank you.